Hello, and welcome to the CDAO Fall Conference. This is Amaresh Tripathy. I'm the Global Analytics Leader at Genpact. We are thrilled to be the platinum sponsors here to the event. And I'm excited to actually to have with me today Kiran Mysore, who is the former Vice President of Operational Analytics and Insight at Medtronic. Kiran, welcome.
Thank you.
Perfect. We thought we'll kind of switch it up a little bit and try to do it a little bit of a conversation style kind of a discussion here for this keynote. And the foundation of it is some of the research that we've been doing for past 6 to 9 months on a very important topic, which is the economics of decision making. What we generally find is while we, in our analytics professionals, we talk a lot about kind of the cool technology aspects of it, some organization aspects of it, some of the challenges we face as analytics leader. I do not think we spend as much time thinking about what is the economic foundation of a lot of our functions. And that's kind of what we've been studying. And I thought Kiran and I will kind of share a little bit of we'll share a little bit of the research, and Kiran can opine on based on some of his experiences in past many companies. So just starting off the discussion, I mean, as any organization, we make like hundreds of critical decisions, right? If you're underwriting, analytics and underwriting, you think about like how do you make decisions around credit limits and which loans to approve or not, or if you're thinking of from a supply chain perspective, you're wondering about how much to make to meet the demand, how much inventory to keep, and how levers you put. But very rarely do we wonder how much actually it costs to make some of those decisions. Kiran, what's been your perspective? You've been in the shoe of like being an analytics leader in multiple organizations. So what's been your perspective on the topic?
Absolutely, Amresh. So firstly, thanks for having me. You know, most people don't think about what it takes to really make a decision from a cost perspective, right? People think that cost is attributed to the dashboard that they're looking at, right? The cost of building that dashboard or the analytics that they use to sort of, that are top of mind. But really the cost varies with the type of decision, the data that is needed, the ecosystem that is used to make the decision. And so I think you really have to sort of take all of those costs into account when you think about the true cost of making that decision. And you also have to sort of think about what types of decisions are being made, right? So there's the first time decision, which is, you're in a new business situation and you want to make a quick call with the data that you have. There is the multiple ongoing decisions that happen as part of a business cycle. So what is the cost of making those? That sometimes the decision that is in front of you can be great from a data perspective, but can you actually change behavior with that decision, right? For example, if you're a planner and you have the best planning input in front of you, can you actually go and make that affected in the system, right? I think those are the key things you have to sort of think about from a decision-making perspective and the cost.
No, absolutely, Kiran, absolutely. And I think what we found in the research, I mean, just you say the cost, kind of to the point that costs add up, roughly 15% of the IT costs, and if this is just looking at the IT costs of it, I mean, there are other business costs that you would add up of an organization is around producing insights, right? And if you think about like hundreds of millions of dollars of IT spend in many large organizations, and these numbers quickly add up. And what we found is there are like four types of costs that essentially, if you want to think about, are there, and there are levers to kind of pull to kind of manage them better. Like for instance, there's a big cost of the discovery of data, and then there's a cost around the ingestion of it. Like you have discovered the data, like the ingestion of the data and organizing that. The data management costs, there's a third big category, and then finally, probably in some ways the last mile piece of it, which is the cost of consumption of data. So all of those four things, and there are various levers to kind of pull to manage that and make it much more effective. Are the four things we found. So what we should do, Kiran, is let's go one by one and let's kind of discover like what's been your experience in each of them.
Sure.
So the first one, and actually before we start, I mean, if there are questions, please kind of continue to post them, and we'll definitely get them to answer them. So the first question, the first one, Kiran, has been the discovery cost of the data. And that's surprisingly, I mean, even in our research, what I found is like roughly 5 to 8% of the IT spend is on kind of discovery of data. And obviously you can imagine you have to go to third-party sources sometimes. You have to even internally, you have to kind of go and look for like other transaction systems. And part of it is whether it's, I mean, more and more, I think you're able to manage it if you're able to go and put it on some sort of a cloud infrastructure. So things are much more, a little bit more organized, and you can start pulling them, and the discovery costs are lower. Sometimes the groceries aren't there, and all the other factors. So what's been your experience, Kiran, on, I mean, on the data discovery part of it, and was that a big challenge for you guys?
Absolutely. So one of my experiences, and this has come about many, many times, is that, decisions are really made with many different inputs, right? These days, you don't make a decision with just one sort of set of data. You have to connect a lot of different types of data. And so it's really important to find ways to connect the data in a more seamless fashion. And the cost of integration is very high, right? When you really think about it, if you have to put together, different sentiments of maybe social sentiments in there, maybe different structured and unstructured data to really make a decision, the cost can be very high. So that is one factor you're dealing with. The other factor you're dealing with is that data is now a lot more granular, right? You want to go to the lowest level of detail, and you want it to be real time. And your data might be coming from different sources, from external, outside of your company as well, especially now in the COVID situation when so many different inputs are required from outside. So the challenge here is, as decision-making becomes more and more integrated, and the need for having your integration it becomes higher and higher, we find that a cloud approach really lowers your cost. And if it's done right, it gives you the right level of tools, right level of integration points, and then ultimately ensures the right level of agility. And so that's really the big sort of trend is leveraging the cloud to really ingest your data, be able to get to that final decision-making point as fast as you can.
Absolutely. The discovery, and I definitely, the cloud definitely would do that. And I think the operative word was doing it right. That's an entire different topic that we need to probably at some point talk about. The second big factor is just basically the cost of ingestion, right? Just because you know where the different sources are, it doesn't mean I mean, there are just so many sources and everything. And earlier, like you have the whole notion of ETL to ELT, and you kind of ingest all the data together and then figure out what you want to do. There's a whole host of things that are going on there. But the reality is, if you don't want to make it a IT-centric project and tie it to value, there are different interesting ways to connect data to business value and ingest in some sort of a prioritization, right? And that itself can probably like move the economic lever by 5 to 10%. And that's like a big cost and kind of a big lever for them. Kiran, what's been your experience in terms of thinking about like connecting to business value in terms of ingestion? Did you do that? Any learnings from there?
Absolutely. So one thing here, when you think about the decision-making process, right, it's really important to hone in on the right fit-for-use data set. You want to really pick the data that are relevant, right? It's easy to say, let's take every possible data set you have and just dump it in the data lake. Obviously, that has a high cost to it, and that takes time, and the opportunity cost of decision-making is lost. So the key here is to think about the decisions that are being made and think about domains of data, right? So think about the domain of the data that is going to enable you to make that decision. And sometimes there are multiple domains. So for example, it's easy to think about a decision to be made on inventory in your supply chain, right? But if all you're doing is trying to make a decision on one aspect of inventory, it's really important as a data practitioner to think about the domain. Go to your source system and get all the data that you can for that domain for inventory. Similarly, if you're thinking about employee attributes, it's easy to say, just give me the first and last name, or maybe the count of employees, and have a very targeted question. But as you sort of keep having to go back to the data over and over again, because more and more questions come up, it's actually better to sort of get all of the data together once from your source system. Now, the key here is as you get all of the data together once, then you don't, you're actually minimizing your cost, because the next question that is asked actually lowers it. The key consideration here is that you have to also think about data privacy. because you obviously, when you're getting more data, you have to be cognizant of what data is considered protected and apply the appropriate data privacy considerations as part of that.
Yeah, no, and there was an example where we were working where we to your whole point around, yeah, what you're saying is think about the business value, but also think about there is a economics of scale once you go domain by domain. So like, how do you kind of balance kind of the value on a particular way? I mean, so the one example was, so we were doing a bunch of use cases, we were building a finance data lake at one of our clients. They're a healthcare client, and one of the things they were trying to do was they were trying to focus on everything that is needed for better cash forecasting. That was kind of a use case that was there. And then what about SG&A spend trends? So they were trying to kind of collect data on that. And what we found is that if you go and collect for SG&A spend trends, and if you are able to kind of go domain by domain, you actually can activate that cash forecasting one like much more easily. The incremental effort that is required, it suddenly goes down. And that kind of leads to the broader point is, if you have a portfolio of use cases, it actually, if you go use case by use case and look for data versus when you have a portfolio of use case and then you sequence based on the portfolio, I think your overall cost of this basically data ingestion becomes a lot lower. So that's kind of one of the big learnings that we have had right there. Very consistent with what you just said. Let's talk a little on another opportunity there, which is kind of the data management itself, right? Because and that this is kind of in some ways again one of the big cost drivers that in our research, and I think there are two ways to look at it. One is obviously this is like cleansing, aggregating, transformation of data. That's kind of in some ways the heart of the analysis to a large extent also. And it happens to be very iterative in process. But if you do not think of it, I mean, it's not only just the cost aspect that you have to think of it, it's actually the very scarce analyst time, because the more time you spend on some of the basic stuff to do, and you haven't taken care of that, it actually takes away from the analysis time in some ways. And that's a kind of most of the time it's a fixed capacity and a hard to get talent. So there's a direct cost and there's a big opportunity cost of data management if not done well. And what we've seen, Kiran, is more and more organizations kind of embracing this model of data as a service, right? Which is, how do I almost create a factory model for understanding the data, their attributes, the quality of that attributes, and then providing it as a service, and then an ongoing monitoring of it. It's almost like kind of creating that factory model for data management. So just wanted to see, and there's a lot of conversations, a lot of clients kind of working on like large beverage provider that we work with. We actually see them doing a very nice job there. What's been your experience at Medtronic and elsewhere?
You know, the thing about data quality, right, is data quality can be a big lurking variable or all of your data costs. Depending on what data you pull in, the cost of cleansing can be massive. Now, a lot of folks think about cleansing as a technology problem to solve, right? You know, it's bad data from a source system, let's go solve it. And that's true. But there is also, to your point, Amaresh, there is actually the cost of interpreting the data, bad data, and making an incorrect decision based on that. And so the concept of data quality and the cost of data quality affects not just the tech teams, but also the business teams. So the key here is to really understand the source to destination transformation that is happening as part of your data cleansing efforts to improve your data quality. And there are some techniques here. You know, clearly you want to document your data enrichment strategy. And to the extent possible, if you're doing the same sort of enriching over and over again, you want to go and push it back to the source system as much as you can. That way you get fresh and clean data that flows through. And over time, you know, as business users build their trust on the data and they've certified the data, either through stewardship or better data management practices, it's important to sort of watermark your data and say, this is your trusted data. This is your trusted data foundation, and you can really rely on this to make a decision. And the more you can do that over time, the faster those decisions become, because now you're actually making accurate, decisions based on that information. So the notion of data as a service over time can be a very powerful capability you have. But the key here to get to that level is to have great stewardship of your data, to have good governance of your data as you go through the cleansing process, to have a great catalog that helps you and helps people educate themselves on what is available. And then the lineage part, which is the journey from the source to the destination. Knowing that is actually going to be super helpful in your data cleansing and data strategies.
And Kiran, did you start that journey at a particular domain in a particular area? How did you get started in that?
So I think, again, going back to the decisions you want to make, right? We sort of struck the balance between the business case that was asking us for this data, and then the portfolio view of the data domains that were needed. And so having a roadmap that sort of intersects the two, what decisions do we make, and then what data sets are really germane to the organization. I think connecting the two together in a portfolio view really helped make the best call.
Got it. Yeah, because there's a client of ours is a large financial institution, and they actually started in the risk space, and they basically went through. They had a risk rating of kind of the various domains, and they basically went through that because there was a regulatory aspect of it. So there's a method to a madness, kind of how you kind of go about doing that.
Absolutely.
The fourth kind of topic, which is kind of in some ways maybe the most important one, which is consumption of data and data consumption with costs that's created. And obviously there are various factors at it. But one of the challenges that we normally see in the research is a lot of the analytics skills are siloed. Like you have data visualization experts, some data engineers, you have some kind of business analysts, as well as some data scientists. Like kind of they're all in the organization, within the analytics organization, but kind of running their own silos. And the whole analytic process itself is fairly sequential, right? I mean, it goes from teams to teams. It's almost like a factory model that is there in this case. And a lot of the leading organizations, a lot of the leading analytics organizations we see are starting to kind of embrace what we call analytics pods and an agile way of working to kind of go and drive, essentially pull this lever of cost. So that they can reduce the consumption cost dramatically, or if the value is not there, kind of kill it much quickly, kill ideas much quickly. Have you experimented with analytics pods, and what's been your experience?
Absolutely. So we have, and in my previous experiences, the key strategy has really been about bringing business and IT technology teams together in a way that they work together and solve a common problem. Amaresh, to your point, you're right. A lot of times the linear models of having, different teams that collect requirements and then synthesize the requirements and then build capabilities and then finally give it to business users, that can be very sequential. And a lot of times each team has their own intake mechanisms. And so they're not always incentivized to work together. And, or if they do work together, the inputs and the outputs are always misaligned. So there is an opportunity to really sort of change the game by combining these teams together to work on a common problem. And a lot of times these organizational changes to make this happen can take a long time, and that can create friction in the organization as well. So one of the ways to do it is really to, based on the decision making that is bring these teams together as part of a pod, analytics pod, to really focus and work on that problem, maybe using agile techniques to build those incremental releases as decisions are made, and then quickly move on to the next thing. So you have to sort of think about what works for your organization and for your culture. But ultimately, having an analytics pod by function, by subject area, can be a very quick way to get to that decision making faster. And because analytics tends to be very iterative in nature, having that connection is really important.
Interesting. No, that's very, very consistent, and some good nuggets there. I mean, as I said, we talked about like kind of the four levers that analytics leader can pull, and there are various ways to activate that. Right? I mean, so one activation mechanism is kind of, we are seeing more and more of like analytics transformation offices being set up directly under the chief analytics officers. I mean, folks are investing in cloud analytics data strategy. And then data as a service is becoming, I think, as a bigger theme. And there's a whole host of things around folks are doing around organizing the community of analysts, because not all of the analyst community is sometimes within the chief data chief analytics organization. It's probably spread over. I mean, can you talk a little bit about, I mean, given where we are on time, I'd like to kind of go more focus on the transformation office construct. And I know you've made some progress, you made some good progress there. So would love to understand a little bit on what you did there from setting up the analytics transformation office.
Absolutely. I mean, the transformation office is key, right? I look at it as a navigator for your analytics vessel, right? It tells you sort of what to build, but it also tells you the costs of building them, and really weighs the portfolio, understanding what type of capabilities are costing more and versus less, and which ones are having the most impact. So having this North Star is really important. The other thing I would also stress is the notion of a centralized analytics community, right? It's very expensive to maintain a big team, serve analytics across the organization. But if you can promote more self-service, that is actually going to be key. And these teams have tools like Yammer that share and post ideas. And that's where data as a second language really starts to become an important element of your strategy, which is basically promoting data literacy. How do you use data to make better decisions and interpret data and visualize data? I think these are all really important capabilities to have as part of your transformation office.
Absolutely. Okay, so there's a whole lot of data literacy, and again, that's a much bigger topic. I'm sure we'll talk about at some point. But and listen, I think you just hit on some couple of key points, and the fact just come from this conversation is what's very apparent is the economic aspect of the whole decision-making process is not probably talked about within the analytics leadership as much as it probably the time it deserves, right? Especially in a holistic manner. I mean, you normally see the spend side of it. How much does it cost to kind of go and work with a certain vendor or a certain technology, or like for a particular function? We hear a lot of that. But what is the overall economic model? And I think many analytics leaders do a disservice by not actually embracing it and proactively engaging in this topic, because I mean, the reality is, especially during these times where the budgets will be under a lot of the microscope, and everyone will be looking to kind of cut corners the right way, from a broader community perspective, to drive value with data and analytics in an organization, you have to actually embrace an economic model and be proactive about it. So hopefully, this discussion between you and I, Kiran, will probably inspire a few of our other leaders to kind of go and start thinking about with that lens. But thank you so much, Kiran. I mean, it was lovely to chat with you. And thank you everyone else. Thank you everyone for listening in and joining. I hope you found this useful. And this is obviously a very rich topic, and there's a lot of very broad topic also, and you can only do so much justice in 20 minutes, 25 minutes. But hopefully it's a start of a conversation. Please do visit our booth, the Genpact's booth here, and we look forward to continue the conversation there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.